Let this be a reminder that there really are monsters out there. In 2007, a woman living right near a prison in California got home late one night and went right to bed. Around midnight, she woke up to footsteps on her first floor, assumed it was her roommate, so she goes downstairs to say hi. She yells out to her roommate, who doesn't say anything, and then in walks this giant man who she doesn't recognize. She runs upstairs, jumps in her closet into the crawl space, and hides. As she's helplessly tucked away in this little crawl space, trying not to make any sound, all she hears is this giant man sprinting around her house, running into walls, flipping furniture, and screaming in frustration because he can't find her. Finally, after several hours, she slowly opens the crawl space back up, crawls out, and gets her phone off the nightstand and calls police. As she's telling the police her story, she describes the person who had broken in, and they stop her and say, "Ma'am, go back in the crawl space and stay there. We'll be there as soon as we can." It turned out a 6'11" convicted murderer had escaped the prison and was still on the loose.
I started dating this guy last February, and for Easter he invited me to his family's house. And I really wanted to make a good impression. He was like, "Don't worry, they'll love you. The only thing is that my mom is obsessed with her dog, so make sure you're nice to him." I'm like, of course I'm gonna be nice to her dog. I love dogs. So we get to his house, and the first thing we see is this loud yapping chihuahua running towards us. It's like missing patches of hair and has this really bad underbite. But I was like, oh, what a cutie. Mom's like, isn't he so cute? That's Peter. Who names a dog Peter? So we go to the kitchen, and then all of a sudden, Peter starts vigorously humping my leg. His little pink wiener comes out. The mom's like, oh, he does that. He keeps coming back and humping it. So I go to the bathroom, and in my purse I have this little lavender perfume oil that I rub all over my legs, hoping that Peter won't like the smell of lavender. I go back out, we sit down for dinner. Peter goes under the table and starts licking my legs for the entire dinner. So finally we go home, but then his mom calls the next day, and she's crying because she had to take Peter to the vet because he was throwing up all night. I felt so bad. That dog ingested way too much lavender oil, and it's definitely my fault, but I don't say anything. Peter ended up being fine. He fully recovered. I never went back to his house because I was avoiding Peter, tiny, horny chihuahua from...
Yes, this really did happen. In 2015, a man woke up to a strange post-it note sitting on his desk. On it was a to-do list that he didn't recognize in handwriting that didn't look like his. Since he was up late the night before doing some work, he assumed he must have written out the list when he was half asleep and kind of forgot about it, so he just crumples it up and throws it away. 2 weeks later, he wakes up to dozens of these post-it notes all over his wall, and they're all blank except for one that, in the same weird handwriting, says, "Our landlord isn't letting me talk to you." Now feeling totally freaked out that some crazy person is crawling around his apartment at night, he starts looking for signs of a break-in, but there aren't any. Instead of calling the police, he shares his experience on Reddit asking for help, and one user's comment literally saves his life. Turns out the man was writing the notes to himself and then forgetting because his brain was slowly dying due to a carbon monoxide leak that was only discovered because a user suggested he install a detector.
Get this. So for a couple of years now, I have been working seasonally retail. Stay with me. So during the Christmas season, this guy comes in and I was like, "Hello, sir, welcome in. Is there anything I could help you with today?" And he goes, "Can I have your number?" And into that, I was like, and he was like, "Oh, you're married." And I was like, "No, sir, actually I'm engaged." I'm not engaged. I wear this ring out so that if somebody hits on me, I just can be nice and just be like, "Sorry. I know it's terrible. Sorry, whatever, moving on." So he was like, "Oh, it's too bad you're engaged because I'd love to take you out." And I was like, "Yeah, anyway, how can I help you?" And this man goes, "I'm actually looking for a necklace for my girlfriend." His girlfriend. Then he asks where the $50 and under section is. I was working at a jewelry store. A nice jewelry store. I said, "Unfortunately, there's only a few items in that price range." Showed it to him. He said, "Thanks," winks at me, and walks out the door. Somebody come get your man.
This is why parents should believe their kids. In 2010, a 15-year-old boy started to notice that the door to his attic, which was in his bedroom, was always open. One day, when his mom's giving him a hard time about being lazy, he's like, "Well, you're one to talk. You always leave my attic door open." She's like, "I haven't touched your attic door in months, and nobody else has either." Not easily frightened, the boy decides to leave the attic door open. And so he's laying in bed, and he kind of looks over at the door, and standing in the door frame is a figure staring right at him. He bolts, tells his parents, they don't believe him, and then 6 months later they move anyway. A few years later, the boy discovers his favorite teacher actually moved into his old house. And so he jokingly asks her, "You ever see any ghosts walking around your attic?" Her face got completely serious, and she's like, as soon as we moved in, the door to the attic kept opening. So we investigated, and we found a trap door that led onto the roof. Someone had been crawling in through that entrance and living in the attic for years.
Whenever somebody asks me how I got so good at makeup, I just tell them about the time that my mom put me in solitary confinement for 2.5 months with no phone, radio, TV, computer, nothing like that. I couldn't even eat dinner with my family. They put cameras outside my room so that I couldn't leave without them knowing. I had to call on the intercom to ask to use the bathroom. But my mom gave me a curling iron, a straightener, and a crap ton of makeup to keep myself busy. And then she told everybody she knew that I tried to kill myself, and that's why she had to put me in solitary confinement. So when I went back to school that fall, I had a lot of explaining to do to my friends about why I had been missing for the last 2.5 months with no contact, but at least I came out kinda hot.
In high school, I had a friend who lived in this old, small apartment building. And on the first floor was this old guy named Dave who had apparently lived in the building forever. And no one really knew what Dave's deal was. The only time people saw him is when he walked outside to walk his tiny dog. But other than that, he never left his apartment. He had a nephew who delivered him groceries once a week. My friend just assumed that Dave was too old or had some sort of sickness that prevented him from leaving the house. One day, my friend was coming home from school and Dave's nephew was leaving the apartment building. And my friend is really sweet, so she was like, "Hey, I know Dave sometimes has troubles getting out of the house, so if you ever need me to go over there and bring him something, let me know. I'm always happy to help." And the nephew looked really shocked and terrified. He was like, "No, you should never go over to Dave's ever." And then he got really awkward and he was like, "Okay, gotta go, bye." And then a few weeks later, my friend was coming home from a Halloween party late at night. And when she got inside her apartment building, Dave's door on the first floor was wide open. And it was pitch black inside his apartment. But then she heard something behind her.
This is why you should never talk to strangers. In the early 2000s, a young girl was waiting outside her friend's house peeling the bark off of a tree when a strange man approaches her. As he got closer, she could see that he was grinning ear to ear and his face was white as a ghost. He walks right up to her and pinches her on the arm and says, "How would you like it if I peeled your skin off?" Just then, her friend's mom yells for her to come inside and the man walks away. It would be years before the girl's mother would finally tell her who this man really was. Her friend's mom had seen the man pinch her on the arm and had immediately called the police, who quickly rounded this guy up. Plastered all across the inside of his van were dozens of pictures of this girl. But what they found in his storage locker is straight out of a nightmare. In the locker was a chair with hand and arm restraints. Next to it was an anatomy book and hundreds of torture tools.
One day, my cousin made a Tinder, and we were having a family barbecue, so he came over. He was like, "Oh my god, Sam, like this really hot girl just like matched with me." And then he shows me. And then I see the profile, and it's literally pictures of Madison beer. But the name on the profile was like Kalani. I was like, "Bro, I don't know who you think you're fucking texting, but it's not Madison beer. You're texting someone's fucking auntie right now, whole ass auntie." He's like, "Guess we're about to find out." I was like, "No, what the no?" He's like, "Yeah, I just gave her the Addy. She's about to pull up. Like, we're gonna meet. Like, it's all cool, Sam. Like, trust me." Trust me. Trust me, he said. Okay. I trusted him. So I see a car pull up, and he's like, "Oh my god, I think it's her." I was like, "Oh shit, what if I do meet Madison Beer?" The door freaking opens, and this old lady pops up. I look at my cousin, and I'm like, Go hug her. Go. You were so excited. It's Kalani, the one and only. Come on."
So this is a story time about my insane boss. So as a lot of you guys know, for 4 years, I worked as a Disney princess. It wasn't in Disney World or anything. It was a place locally, but it was still one of the most fun jobs I've ever had. Our boss, however, was her own kind of person. She was continuously going through cycles of being on and off with different boyfriends, and we could always tell if they were together or not by the way she treated us. Like, anytime there was a fight, she would always take it out on us. There was one time where we were just setting up in the back, and she walked back yelling, saying to stop gossiping about her. Literally none of us were even talking. She also had a massive issue with hoarding, so like all of the back rooms were filled with junk. She started to get a lot of calls from tax collectors, and she would always make one of us answer the phone. Eventually, they started to stop by, and she would just go hide. A couple weeks after this, I came in for work, and the entire place had been robbed. Things stolen, glass everywhere. And she told me my social security had been taken. However, I knew something was off. Like and share, and I'll do a part 2.
Ooh. Fasting. So when I got into work that day and I just walked in and saw the glass everywhere, I just turned to her and I was like, "What happened?" Like, she wasn't explaining it to anyone. She was just sitting there at the desk acting like it was a normal day. And she was like, "Well, we were robbed and they took a lot of stuff. However, we made the observation that everything that was stolen was something that was broken." Almost as if the robber knew that that printer, that MP3 player, and that computer wasn't working. We also all made the observation that the glass was outside of the building. So it was like someone broke the glass from inside. The police were up there asking questions, and she was talking to them about how my social security was stolen along with a few of the other girls. But I guess it wasn't an issue since we were under 18. I don't know. But our theory was that she was probably cashing a check from that whole robbery thing and that it was probably covered by insurance. Either way, she did not have the money to stay in business, so we had new management come in like real soon. I would also like to add that one of the things being hoarded at this place were Webkins. There was hundreds as far as the eye can see. I have so many more stories coming, so don't be shy. Follow me.
This is why you should always trust your gut. In the 1970s, a young couple decided to go for a late night hike in the woods. A couple minutes into their walk, and the man remembers thinking something's not right. He tells his girlfriend, but they just decide to ignore it and keep going, until he steps on something that felt really soft, like it was alive. Before he has a chance to see what he stepped on, they hear all this rustling in the bushes next to them, and they bolt. Years later, that couple turns on the TV, and a death row inmate who's about to be executed is being interviewed. And they ask him, was there ever a time that you were almost caught red-handed? He responded, yes, one time. I was in the woods, and a couple walked through, and the man actually stepped on the body of a girl I had just killed. I was hiding in the bushes just a few feet away. They didn't see me. That couple had run into one of the worst serial killers of all time, Ted Bundy.
Story time about how my best friend and I used to get away with hanging out with boys. So my friend and I's parents were really strict, which meant no hanging out with boys, not even if a parent was there. And we would always come up with these elaborate lies to do stuff that we weren't allowed to do. And we were in high school, so we really wanted to go hang out with one of our guy friends. So we came up with this plan where we would tell them that we were going to a football game because it was a Friday, and that an Uber was coming to pick us up. And there really was no Uber, it was actually just our guy friend coming to pick us up. But since my dad didn't let me go in Ubers, we had to go to my best friend's house. And her parents were fine with it because they loved me and thought that I was the most perfect child on earth. So we get in our Uber and we just go to his house and hang out the whole time. I literally don't even know how we got away with this because it was the same exact car every time and the same exact Uber driver every time.